Sarah Martinez stepped through the glass doors of Whitmore and Associates for the first time, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The investment firm's lobby screamed wealth and power, with its towering windows and expensive artwork adorning every wall. She clutched her leather briefcase tighter, knowing that today would determine whether she could truly start fresh after the scandal that destroyed her previous career. The receptionist, a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair, looked up with a practiced smile. "Miss Martinez?" "Mr. Whitmore is expecting you on the 15th floor." As Sarah waited for the elevator, she caught sight of her reflection in the polished steel doors. At 32, she had learned to mask her emotions well, but today felt different. The weight of her past pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. 3 years ago, she had been accused of embezzling funds from her previous employer, a prestigious accounting firm in Chicago. Though the charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, the damage to her reputation was irreversible. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing 2 men in expensive suits engaged in hushed conversation. They fell silent when Sarah entered, their eyes scanning her from head to toe with undisguised suspicion. She had grown accustomed to these looks over the past few years, but they still stung. "15th floor," she said quietly to the elevator operator. One of the men, a silver-haired gentleman with sharp features, stepped closer. "You must be the new financial analyst we've heard so much about," he said, his tone carrying an undertone of skepticism. "James Crawford, Senior Vice President." Sarah extended her hand professionally. "Sarah Martinez. I look forward to working with the team." Martinez. Crawford's handshake was firm but brief. "Indeed, though I must say, your background certainly raised some eyebrows during the hiring process." His companion, a younger man with dark hair, nodded in agreement. The elevator reached the 15th floor, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. Word of her past had clearly preceded her arrival. She had hoped that Richard Whitmore's decision to hire her despite her history would signal to the rest of the company that she deserved a chance to prove herself. Instead, it seemed to have created an atmosphere of distrust. Richard Whitmore's corner office commanded a breathtaking view of the city skyline. The CEO himself stood behind his mahogany desk, reviewing documents with intense concentration. At 65, Whitmore had built his firm from nothing into one of the most respected investment houses on the East Coast. His reputation for shrewd business decisions was matched only by his notorious perfectionism. "Sarah, welcome," Whitmore said, looking up from his papers. His gray eyes studied her carefully, as if trying to read her thoughts. "I trust you found the building without difficulty." "Yes, sir. Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Whitmore. I understand the risk you're taking by hiring me, and I won't let you down." Whitmore nodded slowly, walking around his desk to stand directly in front of her. "I've reviewed your credentials extensively, Sarah. Your work at Henderson and Associates was exemplary before the unfortunate incident. That's why I'm willing to give you this chance. Despite the concerns of my board," he gestured toward a chair across from his desk. As Sarah sat down, she noticed several framed photographs showing Whitmore with various politicians and business leaders. The message was clear. This man wielded considerable influence. However, Whitmore continued, returning to his seat, "I need you to understand that trust is earned here. There will be eyes on you, watching every move you make. Some of my employees have expressed reservations about your presence, and frankly, I can't blame them." Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand completely, sir. My work will speak for itself." "See that it does." Whitmore pressed a button on his intercom. "Mrs. Chen, please send in David Morrison." Within moments, a tall man with prematurely gray hair entered the office. David Morrison had the lean build of someone who spent his free time running marathons, and his penetrating blue eyes seemed to catalog every detail of Sarah's appearance. "David serves as our chief security officer," Whitmore explained. "He'll be orienting you to our security protocols and access procedures." Morrison stepped forward, his expression neutral but watchful. "Miss Martinez, welcome to Whitmore and Associates." I'll need you to complete several forms regarding background verification and security clearance levels. Additionally, you'll receive a temporary access card that will be upgraded based on your performance and tenure with the company. Of course, Sarah replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling that Morrison's scrutiny went beyond standard security measures. Your workstation has been prepared on the 12th floor, Morrison continued, in the Financial Analysis Department. You'll be reporting to Patricia Williams, our department head. She's particular about maintaining the integrity of our financial operations. The way Morrison emphasized the word integrity made Sarah's cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure. I look forward to meeting her. Whitmore stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Sarah, I hope you'll find Whitmore and Associates a challenging and rewarding place to rebuild your career. Just remember that reputation is everything in this business. Once lost, it's nearly impossible to recover. As Sarah left Whitmore's office with Morrison, she couldn't help but feel that his words carried a veiled threat. The hallways they walked through were lined with photographs showcasing the company's achievements over its 40-year history. Employees they passed offered polite but distant greetings, their eyes following Sarah long after she had moved on. The 12th floor buzzed with activity as financial analysts hunched over computer screens displaying complex charts and market data. Morrison led Sarah to a desk positioned in the center of the floor, where she would be clearly visible to everyone around her. The location felt intentional, as if she were being placed under a microscope for constant observation. Patricia Williams emerged from a nearby office, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, and her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. At 58, she had worked her way up through the ranks at Whitmore and Associates, earning a reputation for her meticulous attention to detail and unwavering dedication to accuracy. Miss Martinez, Patricia said, her tone professionally cold. I've reviewed your file. Martinez, your previous work shows promise, but given the circumstances surrounding your departure from Henderson and Associates, you'll understand why I intend to personally review all of your analyses before they're submitted to clients. Sarah felt her face flush. Mrs. Williams, I appreciate your caution, but I hope that in time you'll feel comfortable trusting my work based on its quality rather than my past. Patricia's expression didn't soften. Time will tell, Miss Martinez. For now, you'll be working on preliminary market assessments for our smaller clients. Nothing that could significantly impact the firm's reputation should there be any irregularities. The not-so-subtle implication hung in the air like a dark cloud. Sarah was being assigned to handle the company's least important accounts, essentially being treated as a junior employee despite her years of experience and advanced qualifications. Morrison handed Sarah her temporary access card, a white badge with red lettering that clearly identified her as having limited clearance. This will get you into the building and your floor, he explained. Higher security areas require upgraded authorization, which must be earned through demonstrated reliability. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah threw herself into her assigned tasks, determined to prove her worth through exceptional work quality. However, she couldn't ignore the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly whenever she approached, or the way her colleagues seemed to position themselves to keep her in their line of sight. During her lunch break in the company cafeteria, Sarah sat alone at a small table near the windows, picking at a salad while reviewing financial reports on her tablet. The isolation felt familiar yet painful, reminding her of the months following her termination from Henderson and Associates, when former friends and colleagues had avoided her like a contagious disease. Mind if I join you? Sarah looked up to see a young woman with curly red hair and friendly green eyes standing beside her table. The woman appeared to be in her mid-20s and wore a casual blazer over dark jeans. Please, Sarah said, grateful for any human contact that didn't seem hostile. I'm Jennifer Brooks, but everyone calls me Jen. I work in IT support. Jen sat down with her tray, which held a sandwich and chips. I heard through the grapevine that you started today. How are you finding it so far? Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to someone she had just met. It's been an adjustment. Everyone's been very professional. Jen laughed softly. That's corporate speak for They're treating you like a pariah, isn't it? Look, I know about your situation. Word travels fast in a place like this. Then why are you sitting with me? Sarah asked, surprised by her own directness. Because I believe in second chances, Jen replied simply. Plus, I've seen how the rumor mill works around here. Half the stuff people whisper about isn't even true, and the other half gets blown completely out of proportion. For the first time since arriving at Whitmore and Associates, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Thank you. I really needed to hear that today. Don't mention it. But I will say this. If you want to succeed here, you need to be absolutely perfect. These people are waiting for you to make even the smallest mistake so they can feel justified in their suspicions. Sarah nodded grimly. She had expected as much, but hearing it confirmed by a friendly face somehow made it more real. The rest of her first week followed a similar pattern. Sarah arrived early each morning and stayed late into the evening, double-checking every calculation and analysis until they were flawless. Her preliminary reports impressed Patricia Williams enough to earn grudging approval, though the department head's attitude remained cool and watchful. During team meetings, Sarah's suggestions were met with polite but skeptical silence. When she proposed a new method for analyzing emerging market trends, James Crawford questioned her motivations, wondering aloud whether she was trying to implement untested procedures that might benefit certain clients inappropriately. I'm simply suggesting we consider alternative data sources that could provide our clients with a competitive advantage, Sarah had responded, her voice steady, despite the anger boiling inside her. Alternative data sources, Crawford had repeated slowly. That's an interesting phrase. At Henderson and Associates, didn't you have access to alternative data sources that others couldn't verify? The accusation was subtle but unmistakable. Sarah felt every pair of eyes in the conference room focused on her, waiting to see how she would respond to the thinly veiled suggestion that she might still be engaged in unethical behavior. Mr. Crawford, she had said carefully, the methodology I'm proposing is based on publicly available information and industry-standard analytical techniques. I'd be happy to provide detailed documentation of my sources and methods for review. Crawford had nodded with a satisfied smile, as if her defensive response confirmed his suspicions rather than addressing his concerns. By Friday afternoon of her first week, Sarah felt emotionally drained from constantly having to prove her innocence and competence. She was packing up her desk when Morrison appeared beside her workstation. Miss Martinez, Mr. Whitmore would like to see you in his office before you leave today. Sarah's stomach clenched. Had she done something wrong? Had someone made a complaint about her work or behavior? She followed Morrison to the elevator, her mind racing through every interaction she'd had during the week, searching for anything that might have been misinterpreted or criticized. Whitmore's office felt even more imposing in the late afternoon light. The CEO sat behind his desk, reviewing what appeared to be a personnel file. Her personnel file, Sarah realized with growing anxiety. Please, sit down, Sarah, Whitmore said without looking up from the documents. I've been reviewing your work from this week. Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I hope it's been satisfactory, sir. More than satisfactory, Whitmore replied, finally meeting her eyes. Patricia tells me your analyses have been exceptionally thorough and accurate. Your attention to detail is impressive. Relief washed over Sarah, though she remained cautious. Thank you, sir. I'm committed to earning the trust of my colleagues. About that, Whitmore leaned back in his chair, studying her intently. I want you to know that I'm aware of the reception you've received this week. Some of my employees have been less than welcoming. Sarah chose her words carefully. I understand their concerns, Mr. Whitmore. Given my history, their caution is natural, perhaps. But I also believe in giving people opportunities to prove themselves, which is why I'm offering you a chance to do exactly that. Whitmore opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a different access card. This one was blue with gold lettering, clearly indicating a much higher security clearance level. Starting Monday, you'll be working on some of our more sensitive projects, accounts that require access to confidential client information and proprietary investment strategies. Sarah's heart raced. This was either an incredible opportunity or an elaborate test designed to see if she could be trusted with valuable information. "Sir, I'm honored by your confidence in me." "Don't thank me yet," Whitmore said, sliding the new access card across his desk. "This upgrade comes with significant responsibilities and risks. Any breach of confidentiality, any hint of impropriety, and not only will you be terminated immediately, but I'll ensure that you never work in finance again. Are we clear?" "Completely clear, sir." "Good. Your new assignment will involve analyzing investment portfolios for some of our most valued clients. These are individuals and institutions with assets in the hundreds of millions. Their privacy and security are paramount." As Sarah took the new access card, she noticed that her hands were trembling slightly. This opportunity could be the key to rebuilding her reputation and proving her integrity. But it also felt like walking across a minefield blindfolded. "One more thing," Whitmore added as she prepared to leave. "Your work on these accounts will require access to our secure document storage facility on the 20th floor. Very few employees have this privilege. Don't give me reason to regret extending it to you." Walking back to the elevator with her new access card, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. She had been given a chance to prove herself. But she also knew that her every move would be scrutinized even more closely now. The blue card in her hand felt like both a key to redemption and a potential weapon that could destroy her if mishandled. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Sarah caught her reflection once again in the polished steel. This time, instead of uncertainty, she saw determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them head-on. Her past mistakes had cost her everything once before, but she refused to let them define her future. The weekend passed slowly as Sarah mentally prepared herself for the increased responsibilities and scrutiny that Monday would bring. She spent hours researching the latest investment trends and regulatory changes, determined to be as prepared as possible for whatever new challenges awaited her. Sunday evening, as she laid out her clothes for the next day, Sarah allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. Despite the suspicious looks and whispered conversations, she had survived her first week at Whitmore and Associates. More importantly, she had earned enough trust to be given additional responsibilities. But as she drifted off to sleep, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her real test was just beginning. The blue access card on her nightstand seemed to gleam in the moonlight, a reminder of both the opportunity and the danger that lay ahead. Monday morning arrived with an unexpected snowfall that blanketed the city in pristine white. Sarah stood at her apartment window, sipping coffee and watching the early commuters navigate the slippery sidewalks below. The peaceful scene contrasted sharply with the anxiety churning in her stomach. Today, she would begin working with Whitmore and Associates' most valuable clients, and she knew that every eye in the company would be watching for any sign of failure. The 20th floor of the Whitmore building was unlike anything Sarah had encountered during her first week. While the lower floors buzzed with activity and conversation, this level maintained an almost library-like quiet. Thick carpeting, muffled footsteps, and the walls were adorned with original artwork that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Sarah's new workstation was located in a glass-walled office that provided privacy while still allowing supervisors to observe her activities. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She was being given important work, but remained under constant surveillance. "Miss Martinez, welcome to the Executive Analysis Division." Sarah turned to find Eleanor Hartley approaching with a stack of files clutched against her chest. Eleanor was a woman in her early 40s with an immaculate appearance and an air of efficiency that suggested she had never made a mistake in her professional life. "Mrs. Hartley, thank you. I'm eager to contribute to the team's success." Eleanor's smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure you are. I'll be your direct supervisor for these accounts. Given your background, Mr. Whitmore has asked me to review your work closely before it goes to clients." The familiar sting of being reminded about her past made Sarah's jaw tighten, but she maintained her professional demeanor. "Of course. I appreciate the guidance." Eleanor handed her the first file. "This is the Pemberton Foundation account. They manage charitable assets worth approximately $400 million. Your job is to analyze their current portfolio and recommend adjustments for the upcoming quarter." Sarah opened the file and immediately recognized the complexity of the task. The Pemberton Foundation's investments spanned multiple sectors and international markets. Creating accurate projections would require access to sensitive market intelligence and confidential financial data. The information you'll need is stored in our secure database, Eleanor continued, gesturing toward Sarah's computer. Your new access card will get you into the system, but remember that every query you make is logged and reviewed. As Eleanor walked away, Sarah couldn't help but notice how other employees on the floor watched their interaction. She was beginning to understand that her presence here wasn't just about doing good work. It was about proving that she could handle sensitive information without compromising it. Sarah spent the morning immersing herself in the Pemberton Foundation's financial history. The foundation focused on education and healthcare initiatives in underserved communities, and Sarah found herself genuinely interested in their mission. However, as she dug deeper into their investment portfolio, she began to notice some concerning patterns. Several of the foundation's recent investments had performed significantly below market expectations, resulting in substantial losses that reduced the funds available for charitable programs. More troubling, many of these underperforming investments shared common characteristics that suggested poor due diligence rather than simple market volatility. By lunchtime, Sarah had compiled a preliminary analysis that painted a worrying picture of the foundation's financial management. She hesitated before submitting her findings to Eleanor, knowing that her recommendations would likely involve significant changes that the foundation's board might resist. Interesting reading? Sarah looked up to find Jennifer Brooks standing beside her desk with 2 cups of coffee. Despite working on different floors, Jen had made an effort to check in on Sarah periodically during her first week. Very interesting, actually. Thanks for the coffee. Sarah accepted the cup gratefully. How did you manage to get up here? I thought this floor had restricted access. Its support has access to most areas, Jen explained, settling into a chair across from Sarah's desk. Plus, I wanted to see how you were adjusting to the big leagues. Sarah glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard, then leaned forward slightly. Can I ask you something? In your experience working here, have you ever noticed anything unusual about how certain accounts are managed? Jen's expression became more serious. What kind of unusual? Investment decisions that don't make sense from a risk-return perspective. Patterns that suggest someone might not be acting in their client's best interests. That's a dangerous line of thinking around here, Jen warned quietly. Are you talking about the Pemberton Foundation? Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face because Jen continued. I've done IT support for their account. I've seen some of the performance reports. Let's just say there have been questions. Questions from who? From people who cared enough to ask them. But those people aren't working here anymore. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. What happened to them? One transferred to another firm. Another took early retirement. Nothing dramatic, but the message was clear. Some questions are better left unasked. After Jen left, Sarah found herself staring at the Pemberton Foundation file with new eyes. Were the poor investment decisions simply the result of bad luck and market volatility? Or was something more sinister happening? And if she voiced her concerns, would she be seen as a whistleblower trying to expose wrongdoing, or as a suspected embezzler attempting to deflect attention from her own potential misconduct? The afternoon brought a new challenge when Eleanor assigned Sarah to review the investment strategy for the Meridian Trust, a private family foundation with assets approaching $600 million. Unlike the Pemberton Foundation, the Meridian Trust's investments showed consistently strong performance. But Sarah quickly noticed something that made her uncomfortable. Many of the Trust's most profitable investments were in companies that had business relationships with Whitmore and Associates. While this wasn't necessarily improper, the pattern suggested possible conflicts of interest that should have been disclosed to the Trust's beneficiaries. Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon carefully documenting her findings, trying to present her analysis in a way that raised important questions without making direct accusations. She knew that her report would be scrutinized not just for accuracy, but for any sign that she might be trying to create problems for the firm. As the workday drew to a close, Sarah prepared to submit her preliminary analyses to Eleanor. Her reports on both foundations raised significant concerns about investment strategies and potential conflicts of interest. but she had backed up every observation with detailed financial data and industry benchmarks. Eleanor reviewed the documents with increasing tension in her expression. Finally, she looked up at Sarah with a mixture of concern and suspicion. "These are very serious allegations you're making, Miss Martinez." "They're observations based on the financial data," Sarah replied carefully. "I've documented all of my sources and methodologies. If my analysis is incorrect, I welcome feedback on where I might have misunderstood the information." "The problem isn't your methodology," Eleanor said slowly. "The problem is that you're questioning investment decisions made by people with decades of experience and stellar reputations. Some might wonder whether someone with your background is looking for problems that don't exist." The accusation hung in the air like a sword over Sarah's head. By doing her job thoroughly and honestly, she was being painted as a troublemaker whose past made her opinions suspect. "Mrs. Hartley, I understand your concerns, but my responsibility is to provide accurate analysis regardless of whether the findings are comfortable or convenient. These foundations trust us to protect their assets and fulfill their charitable missions. Don't they deserve to know if their investments aren't serving those purposes?" Eleanor closed the files and stood up from her chair. "I'll need to discuss these reports with Mr. Whitmore before they go any further. In the meantime, I suggest you be very careful about how you present your findings. Accusations of impropriety are serious matters that can destroy careers and reputations." That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, reviewing copies of her reports, second-guessing every conclusion and recommendation. Had she been too aggressive in questioning the investment strategies? Was she seeing problems where none existed because her own experience had made her paranoid about financial misconduct? Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID showed Richard Whitmore's direct line. "Sarah, I need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. We have some matters to discuss." The line went dead before she could respond. Sarah stared at the phone in her hand, wondering whether she was about to be promoted for her thoroughness or fired for being a troublemaker. Tuesday morning arrived gray and overcast, matching Sarah's mood as she rode the elevator to Whitmore's office. She had spent most of the night rehearsing different ways to explain and defend her analysis, but she still felt unprepared for whatever confrontation awaited her. Whitmore's office contained 2 additional occupants when Sarah arrived: Eleanor Hartley and James Crawford. The presence of the senior vice president suggested that her reports had generated significant concern at the highest levels of the firm. "Sarah, please sit down," Whitmore said, his tone neutral but serious. "I've reviewed your analysis of the Pemberton Foundation and Meridian Trust accounts." "Yes, sir. I hope I've provided useful insights for improving their portfolio performance." Crawford leaned forward in his chair. "Miss Martinez, your reports raise some very serious questions about how these accounts have been managed. Questions that could damage our relationships with valuable clients if they were to become public." "Sir, my only concern is ensuring that our clients receive the best possible service and advice. If there are problems with their current strategies, shouldn't we address them?" "That depends," Whitmore interjected, "on whether the problems are real or imagined. Eleanor tells me you've questioned investment decisions that were made by some of our most experienced advisors." Sarah felt trapped between honesty and self-preservation. "Mr. Whitmore, I've simply analyzed the data and drawn conclusions based on standard financial metrics. If my methodology is flawed, I'm happy to revise my approach." "Your methodology isn't the issue," Crawford said sharply. "The issue is your judgment. Someone in your position should perhaps be more cautious about challenging the decisions of people whose integrity has never been questioned." The implication was crystal clear. As someone whose integrity had been questioned, Sarah should know better than to question others. She felt her anger rising but forced herself to remain calm. "Mr. Crawford, I understand your point, but I believe our clients deserve honest analysis regardless of who conducted it. If I'm wrong about the investment strategies, the data should prove that." Whitmore studied her carefully before speaking. "Sarah, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume your intentions are good. However, I need you to understand the position you're putting the firm in. These clients have trusted us with their assets for years. Suggesting that we've mismanaged their investments could destroy those relationships." "What if we have mismanaged their investments?" Sarah asked quietly. The question hung in the air for several long seconds. Eleanor shifted uncomfortably in her chair, while Crawford's expression darkened with barely contained anger. "That's a very serious accusation," Whitmore said finally, "one that would require substantial proof to substantiate." "I'm not making an accusation, sir. I'm asking a hypothetical question. If analysis revealed genuine problems with investment strategies, wouldn't we have an obligation to address them?" "Of course we would," Whitmore replied. "But we also have an obligation to ensure that our analysis is accurate and our concerns are legitimate. Given your background, some people might question whether you're genuinely trying to help these clients, or whether you have other motivations." Sarah felt as if she were being slowly strangled by the weight of her past. Every honest observation she made was viewed through the lens of her previous troubles, making it impossible for her to do her job effectively. "Mr. Whitmore, what would you like me to do? Should I revise my reports to be less critical of the current investment strategies? I want you to be absolutely certain of your facts before you make any recommendations that could damage client relationships," Whitmore said firmly. "And I want you to remember that your future at this firm depends on your ability to work constructively with your colleagues rather than undermining their work." As Sarah left Whitmore's office, she realized she was facing an impossible situation. If she toned down her analysis to avoid rocking the boat, she would be failing in her professional obligations to the clients. But if she continued to raise concerns about investment strategies, she would be seen as a troublemaker whose past made her opinions suspect. The rest of the week passed in a haze of careful work and cautious interactions. Sarah revised her reports to present her findings in the most diplomatic language possible, focusing on opportunities for improvement rather than criticizing past decisions. However, she made sure to maintain copies of her original, more direct analysis. By Friday afternoon, Sarah had begun to notice something troubling about her access to the firm's database. Certain files that had been available to her earlier in the week were now restricted, requiring higher clearance levels that her blue access card couldn't provide. When she asked Eleanor about the restrictions, she was told that access levels were regularly reviewed and adjusted based on job responsibilities. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her access was being gradually reduced as punishment for her thorough analysis of the foundation accounts. She was being given important work with one hand, while being denied the tools to do it properly with the other. Saturday morning, Sarah decided to visit the office to catch up on some research that didn't require access to restricted files. The building was nearly empty except for security guards and a few dedicated employees putting in weekend hours. As she worked at her desk, Sarah noticed unusual activity on the 20th floor. Several senior executives, including Crawford and Morrison, were moving files and having hushed conversations in conference rooms. Their presence on a weekend, combined with the obvious urgency of their activities, suggested something significant was happening. Sarah's curiosity was piqued when she saw Eleanor Hartley emerge from a secure storage room, carrying boxes of documents. The storage room required special access that even Sarah's blue card couldn't provide, making her wonder what kind of sensitive materials were being moved and why. When Eleanor noticed Sarah watching from her office, she quickly averted her gaze and hurried toward the elevators with her boxes. The interaction felt charged with tension, as if Sarah had witnessed something she wasn't supposed to see. Monday brought news that would change everything. During the morning staff meeting, Whitmore announced that the Pemberton Foundation had decided to terminate their relationship with Whitmore and Associates, citing concerns about recent investment performance and a desire to work with a firm that better understood their mission. Sarah felt her stomach drop as she realized the implications. Her analysis of the Foundation's portfolio had somehow reached the client, and her recommendations had likely contributed to their decision to leave. She would undoubtedly be blamed for losing a valuable account, regardless of whether her concerns about their investment strategy were legitimate. Crawford wasted no time in making the connection explicit. "It's unfortunate when a client relationship is damaged by premature or inappropriate analysis," he said, looking directly at Sarah. "Perhaps this will serve as a lesson about the importance of discretion and loyalty." After the meeting, Sarah was summoned to Whitmore's office once again. This time, she found the CEO alone, his expression grave and disappointed. "Sarah, I'm sure you can guess why I've asked you here." "The Pemberton Foundation account, sir." though I'm not sure how my analysis reached them since it was only submitted to Eleanor. How it reached them is less important than the fact that it contributed to their decision to leave, Whitmore said coldly. This is exactly the kind of situation I warned you about when you started working on sensitive accounts. Sarah felt a surge of defiance. Mr. Whitmore, if my analysis was accurate and their investments were underperforming, isn't it possible that they left because they realized their assets weren't being managed effectively? Or they left because someone convinced them that we couldn't be trusted? Whitmore countered. Someone whose own trustworthiness has been questioned in the past. The accusation felt like a physical blow. Sarah realized that no matter how good her work was, or how legitimate her concerns, her past would always be used as a weapon against her. Sir, I stand by my analysis. If the Pemberton Foundation's investments were performing well and serving their mission effectively, my report would have reflected that. The fact that it didn't suggests there were real problems that needed to be addressed. Problems that have now cost this firm a valuable client and damaged our reputation, Whitmore said sharply. I'm beginning to wonder whether giving you access to sensitive accounts was a mistake. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. She was trapped between her professional obligations and the impossible expectations created by her tainted past. But as she looked into Whitmore's eyes, she saw something that surprised her. Not just anger, but also what appeared to be genuine concern. Mr. Whitmore, may I ask you a direct question? Of course. Do you believe I'm trying to sabotage this firm? Or do you think it's possible that I've identified legitimate problems that need to be addressed? Whitmore was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if trying to read her thoughts. Honestly, Sarah, I'm not sure what to believe. Your analysis was thorough and well documented, but the timing and consequences have been problematic. What I need from you now is absolute discretion and loyalty. No more reports that could damage client relationships. Can you give me that assurance? Sarah realized she was being asked to choose between her professional integrity and her job security. If she agreed to tone down her analysis and avoid raising uncomfortable questions, she might keep her position but would compromise her principles. If she refused, she would likely be terminated but could maintain her ethical standards. Mr. Whitmore, I can assure you that I will always act in the best interests of this firm and our clients. If that means identifying problems that need to be fixed, then that's what I'll do. Whitmore nodded slowly. I hope you understand what you're committing to, Sarah. Your future here depends on proving that your loyalty to this firm is stronger than whatever motivations drove your past mistakes. As Sarah left his office, she realized that the real test was just beginning. She had been given access to sensitive information and important accounts, but she was also walking a tightrope where one wrong step could end her career permanently. That evening, as she reviewed her notes and files at home, Sarah made a decision that would prove to be fateful. If there were serious problems with how client accounts were being managed, she needed to gather more evidence before anyone else could be harmed. And if that meant using her access to investigate further, despite the risks to her own position, then that's exactly what she would do. The blue access card on her kitchen table seemed to glow in the lamplight. A key to secrets that could either redeem her reputation or destroy her future forever. The weeks following the Pemberton Foundation's departure created an atmosphere of tension that Sarah could feel the moment she stepped off the elevator each morning. Colleagues who had previously offered polite greetings now avoided eye contact, and conversations stopped abruptly when she entered rooms. She had become a pariah, blamed for losing a valuable client and raising uncomfortable questions about the firm's practices. Despite the hostile environment, Sarah threw herself into her remaining accounts with renewed determination. She had been reassigned to smaller, less prestigious clients, but she treated each analysis with the same meticulous attention she had given to the foundation portfolios. If anything, the increased scrutiny made her more careful and thorough, knowing that any mistake would be used as evidence of her incompetence or untrustworthiness. 3 weeks after the Pemberton incident, Sarah discovered something that would change everything. While researching historical performance data for a small retirement fund account, she accidentally accessed a file that contained information far beyond what her assignment required. The file contained internal communications between senior executives discussing strategies for managing client assets that bore no resemblance to the publicly stated investment approaches. The documents revealed a systematic pattern of directing client funds toward investments that generated higher fees for Whitmore and Associates, regardless of whether those investments served the client's best interests. More disturbing still were references to a special arrangement for certain high-net-worth clients who received preferential treatment in exchange for larger management fees. Sarah's hands trembled as she read through the correspondence. The communications were signed by Crawford, Morrison, and Eleanor Hartley, indicating that the questionable practices involved multiple senior executives. Most shocking of all was a memo from Richard Whitmore himself, authorizing the optimization of fee structures for foundation accounts, including specific instructions to minimize disclosure of conflicts of interest. Realizing that she had stumbled upon evidence of systematic client fraud, Sarah quickly printed copies of the most damaging documents before her access could be revoked. She knew that possessing this information put her in tremendous danger, but she also understood that she had a moral obligation to protect the clients who were being exploited. As she carefully folded the printed documents and tucked them into her briefcase, Sarah noticed that her computer screen showed an access violation warning. The system had detected her entry into restricted files and was automatically logging the incident for security review. Within hours, Morrison and his security team would know exactly what she had accessed. Sarah spent the rest of the day in a state of barely controlled panic, wondering when security would arrive to confront her about the unauthorized file access. She completed her assigned work with mechanical efficiency, while her mind raced through possible explanations for why she had accessed the restricted documents. The confrontation came sooner than expected. At 4:30 that afternoon, Morrison appeared at Sarah's desk, accompanied by two security officers she didn't recognize. "Miss Martinez, we need you to come with us for a security review," Morrison announced loudly enough for everyone on the floor to hear. Sarah felt every eye in the office watching as she gathered her belongings and followed Morrison to a conference room on the 18th floor. The room was sterile and intimidating, with no windows and recording equipment visible on the table. "Sarah," Morrison began once they were seated, "our system logs show that you accessed classified files this afternoon. Files that have nothing to do with your current assignments." Sarah had rehearsed this moment in her mind, but facing Morrison's penetrating stare made her prepared explanations seem inadequate. "I was researching historical data for the Hamilton Retirement Fund account. I may have clicked on the wrong file by mistake." "The wrong file?" Morrison's tone suggested he found her explanation implausible. "The documents you accessed were stored in a completely different database section. Accessing them would require deliberate navigation, not a simple mistake." "I'm not sure what happened," Sarah insisted. "I was following links between related documents and may have gone deeper into the system than I intended." Morrison opened a folder and pulled out printed screenshots showing Sarah's exact navigation path through the database. "According to our logs, you spent 47 minutes reading documents in the restricted files. That's a very long mistake." Sarah felt trapped. The evidence clearly showed deliberate access rather than an accidental click, and Morrison's preparation suggested he had been expecting this confrontation. "Miss Martinez," one of the security officers interjected, "we're going to need to search your belongings and workstation to ensure no confidential information has been compromised." Sarah's briefcase sat beside her chair, containing the printed documents that would undoubtedly lead to her immediate termination and possible criminal charges. She watched helplessly as the security officer picked up the briefcase and began examining its contents. "What's this?" the officer asked, pulling out the folded papers. Before Morrison could examine the documents, the conference room door opened, and Richard Whitmore entered with an expression of grave concern. "Gentlemen, I need to speak with Miss Martinez privately," Whitmore announced. "Please wait outside." Morrison looked surprised by the interruption but complied with his superior's request. Once they were alone, Whitmore sat across from Sarah and studied her face intently. "Sarah, I know what you've discovered," he said quietly. "The question is, what you intend to do about it." Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. Whitmore's admission that he knew about her discovery suggested either that she was walking into a trap or that the situation was far more complex than she had imagined. "Mr. Whitmore, I accessed those files by accident. I wasn't looking for anything improper." "Don't lie to me, Sarah," Whitmore said firmly. You're too smart to stumble into classified files by accident. And I'm too experienced to believe such a convenient explanation. Sarah realized that denying her deliberate access would only make things worse. All right, I was investigating. After what happened with the Pemberton Foundation, I wanted to understand why their investments were performing so poorly. And what did you find? Sarah hesitated, unsure whether Whitmore was testing her honesty or setting her up for a fall. I found evidence that suggests client assets may not always be managed in their best interests. Whitmore nodded slowly. You found the fee optimization documents, the correspondence about preferential treatment for certain clients, the memos discussing how to minimize disclosure requirements. You know about all of this? I wrote most of it, Whitmore admitted. The question is whether you understand what you're really looking at. Sarah felt confused and frightened. Was Whitmore confessing to fraud? Or was there something else happening that she didn't understand? I think I understand that clients are being cheated, she said carefully. That's what it looks like on the surface. Whitmore agreed. But sometimes appearances can be deceiving. Tell me, Sarah. In your analysis of the foundation accounts, did you notice anything unusual about the timing of certain investments? Sarah thought back to her research on the Pemberton Foundation and Meridian Trust. Some of the investments were made just before major market shifts, almost like someone had advance information about economic changes. Exactly. And what would that suggest to you? Insider trading, Sarah said quietly. Among other things. Sarah, what you've discovered isn't evidence of fee churning or conflicts of interest. It's evidence of a much more serious problem, one that I've been investigating for the past 6 months. Sarah stared at Whitmore in shock. You've been investigating your own firm? I've been investigating certain employees within the firm who I suspected were engaging in illegal trading activities. The documents you found were part of my efforts to build a case against them. But your signature is on those memos. Your authorization for the fee optimization strategies. My signature, yes, but not my idea. Whitmore pulled a small recording device from his jacket pocket. Sarah, I'm going to tell you something that could put both of our lives in danger if the wrong people find out. Are you prepared to hear it? Sarah nodded, though her heart was racing with fear and confusion. 6 months ago, I discovered that several senior executives at this firm were using client accounts to facilitate insider trading schemes. They were using their access to confidential client information to make trades that benefited both themselves and certain favored clients, while leaving other clients exposed to losses. Crawford and Morrison, among others. When I confronted them, they made it clear that exposing their activities would result in my own destruction. They had manufactured evidence suggesting that I was the mastermind behind the schemes, including forged documents with my signature and recorded conversations taken out of context. Sarah felt the pieces of a complex puzzle clicking into place. So you've been playing along while gathering evidence against them? Exactly. The fee optimization memos you found were written under duress, designed to make it appear that I was complicit in their activities while actually documenting their demands and instructions. But why are you telling me this? Why not just turn them into the authorities? Whitmore's expression grew grim. Because they're not working alone. This conspiracy involves people at regulatory agencies, law enforcement, and other financial institutions. Simply reporting what I've discovered would likely result in the evidence disappearing and both of us facing criminal charges for the very crimes we're trying to expose. Then what can we do? We need irrefutable proof of their activities, documentation that can't be dismissed or destroyed, and I believe I know where to find it. Whitmore stood and walked to the conference room's small window, looking out at the city below. Crawford and Morrison keep the most sensitive documents in a private safe located in Morrison's office. Physical documents that they believe can't be accessed remotely or traced through computer logs. You want me to break into Morrison's safe? I want you to consider the possibility of accessing information that could save hundreds of clients from continued fraud and abuse. But I won't ask you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable. Sarah thought about the families and institutions who trusted Whitmore and Associates with their life savings and charitable missions. She thought about the Pemberton Foundation, whose assets had been deliberately mismanaged while they tried to fund education and healthcare programs for disadvantaged communities. What would I need to do? Whitmore returned to his seat, his expression serious but hopeful. Morrison's office is on this floor, 2 doors down from this conference room. The safe is built into the wall behind a painting of his grandfather. Getting inside requires both a key and a numeric code. Do you have the key and code? I have the code. Morrison uses his grandfather's birthday, which is a matter of public record since the old man was a local politician. As for the key, Whitmore pulled a small brass key from his pocket. Morrison had a duplicate made last month. I managed to obtain the original from the locksmith who created the copy. Sarah stared at the key in Whitmore's hand. How did you manage that? Let's just say that not everyone at the locksmith's shop approves of Morrison's attitude toward service providers. The reality of what Whitmore was proposing began to sink in. He was asking her to commit breaking and entering, theft, and industrial espionage. If caught, she would face criminal charges that would destroy any chance of rebuilding her reputation. Mr. Whitmore, if we're caught doing this, both of our careers are over, probably our freedom as well. If we don't do this, the fraud continues, and more clients get hurt. Sarah, I know I'm asking you to take an enormous risk, but you're the only person in this building who has both the skills to understand what we'll find and the motivation to see justice done. Why me? Why not handle this yourself, or bring in outside investigators? Because Crawford and Morrison watch my every move. They know I suspect them, so they're careful around me. But you're the perfect candidate for this operation because they see you as a disgraced employee with questionable loyalty. They'll never suspect that you're working with me to expose their crimes. Sarah realized that her tainted reputation, which had been a liability throughout her time at Whitmore and Associates, could now become an asset. Crawford and Morrison's suspicion and contempt for her made her the ideal person to access information they would never allow Whitmore to see. If I agree to do this, what happens afterward? We turn the evidence over to federal investigators who specialize in financial crimes. People I've identified who aren't connected to the corruption network. Crawford, Morrison, and their accomplices get prosecuted, and the clients get their money back. And if I get caught? Whitmore's expression grew somber. If you get caught, I'll do everything in my power to protect you. But I can't guarantee that it will be enough. Sarah stood and walked around the conference room, weighing the risks and potential consequences of Whitmore's proposal. She thought about her destroyed reputation and the suspicion that followed her everywhere. She thought about the clients whose trust was being violated and the charitable organizations whose missions were being undermined by greed and corruption. When would this happen? Tonight. Morrison and Crawford are attending a client dinner that will keep them out of the building until after midnight. The overnight security staff is minimal, and your access card will get you onto the 18th floor without raising suspicions. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine the course of her future. Mr. Whitmore, if I do this, and we expose the corruption, will that clear my reputation? Sarah, if we succeed, you'll be remembered as the person who had the courage to do the right thing when everyone else was too frightened or compromised to act. Your reputation won't just be cleared, it will be restored. The promise of redemption, combined with her sense of moral obligation to the defrauded clients, proved irresistible. All right, I'll do it. Whitmore handed her the brass key and a slip of paper with the numeric code written in pencil. The safe contains files organized by client name and date. Look for anything related to the Pemberton Foundation, Meridian Trust, and a company called Apex Consulting. Those files should contain the evidence we need to prove the insider trading scheme. What if the safe is empty, or the files aren't there? Then we'll have to find another way to gather evidence. But based on conversations I've overheard, I'm confident that Morrison keeps the most incriminating documents in that safe. As Sarah prepared to leave the conference room, Whitmore placed a hand on her shoulder. Sarah, I want you to know that I believe in your integrity. Everything you've been through, all the suspicion and mistrust you've endured, has led to this moment. You have a chance to prove that your character is stronger than your past mistakes. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, staring at the brass key and numeric code, knowing that in a few hours she would either vindicate herself or destroy any remaining chance of a legitimate career. She had lived with suspicion and doubt for so long that the prospect of finally proving her integrity felt both terrifying and exhilarating. At 11:30, Sarah returned to the Whitmore building, using her access card to enter through the employee entrance. The lobby was dimly lit and eerily quiet, with only a single security guard stationed at the front desk. He nodded politely as she signed in, accepting her explanation that she needed to complete urgent analysis for a client presentation. The 18th floor felt different at night, with emergency lighting casting long shadows down the hallways. Sarah made her way to Morrison's office, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it could be heard throughout the building. Morrison's office was larger and more luxurious than she had expected, with expensive furniture and artwork that suggested compensation far above what a security officer should be able to afford. The painting of Morrison's grandfather hung prominently behind his desk, just as Whitmore had described. Sarah carefully moved the painting aside, revealing a sophisticated wall safe with both a key lock and digital numeric pad. Her hands shook slightly as she inserted the brass key and entered the code that Whitmore had provided. After what felt like an eternity, the safe's heavy door swung open with a quiet click. Inside the safe were dozens of files organized exactly as Whitmore had predicted. Sarah quickly located the folders for the Pemberton Foundation, Meridian Trust, and Apex Consulting, along with several other files that appeared to contain communications between Crawford, Morrison, and various external contacts. The documents she found exceeded her worst fears about the extent of the corruption. The files contained detailed records of insider trading schemes involving multiple companies and government contracts. Crawford and Morrison had been using advance information about federal infrastructure projects to make profitable investments for themselves and certain clients, while deliberately steering other clients toward losing propositions. Most damning of all were handwritten notes in Morrison's distinctive script detailing payoffs to regulatory officials and law enforcement personnel who helped cover up the illegal activities. The corruption network was far more extensive than Whitmore had suggested, involving people at the highest levels of financial oversight. Sarah photographed every document with her phone, knowing that physical evidence could be destroyed but digital copies could be preserved and distributed. As she worked, she discovered references to a planned major scheme involving a government defense contract that would net the conspirators millions in illegal profits. The defense contract documents revealed that Crawford and Morrison planned to use advance information about the contract award to make massive investments that would pay off when the announcement became public. The scheme was scheduled to begin within the next 2 weeks, meaning that time was running out to stop it. As Sarah prepared to close the safe, she heard footsteps in the hallway outside Morrison's office. Her blood turned to ice as she realized that someone was approaching, possibly Morrison himself returning early from the client dinner. Sarah quickly returned the files to their original positions and closed the safe. But there wasn't enough time to rehang the painting properly. She crouched behind Morrison's desk just as the office door opened and the lights came on. "I know you're in here." Morrison's voice was calm but menacing. Sarah remained perfectly still, hoping that he might not have seen her, or that he was bluffing about knowing someone was present. "Miss Martinez, step out from behind the desk. We need to have a conversation." Sarah realized that hiding was pointless. She stood up slowly, her mind racing for an explanation that might save her from criminal charges. "David, I can explain. I'm sure you can. The question is whether your explanation will be the truth or another lie." Morrison walked around the desk to face her directly. "You've been very busy tonight, breaking into my office, accessing my private safe, photographing confidential documents." Sarah felt her hopes of redemption crashing down around her. Morrison obviously knew exactly what she had been doing, which meant that her mission had failed and she was about to face serious legal consequences. "How did you know I was here?" Morrison smiled coldly. "Because Richard Whitmore called me 20 minutes ago to let me know that you had taken the bait. Did you really think we didn't know about his little investigation? We've been watching him for months, waiting to see how far he would go to gather evidence against us." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Whitmore hadn't been trying to expose Morrison and Crawford. He had been working with them to trap her. Everything he had told her about building a case against corruption had been an elaborate lie designed to get her to incriminate herself. But why? Sarah asked, feeling utterly betrayed and confused. "Because we needed a scapegoat," Morrison explained. "Someone whose background made them the perfect candidate to take the fall for our activities. Your history of suspected embezzlement makes you an ideal patsy for financial crimes. Sarah understood with growing horror that she had been manipulated from the moment she was hired. The suspicious looks, the restricted access, the assignment to sensitive accounts, it had all been part of an elaborate setup designed to position her as the fall guy for a massive fraud scheme. The Pemberton Foundation, she said quietly, left because we told them you were skimming money from their account. They were quite upset to learn that Whitmore and Associates had hired someone with your questionable background to manage their assets. Sarah felt sick as she realized how completely she had been deceived. Her honest analysis of the Foundation's investments had been twisted into evidence of embezzlement, and her efforts to do good work had been used against her. "So what happens now?" she asked. Morrison's expression grew more serious. "Now, you're going to help us complete one final transaction. The defense contract deal I'm sure you read about in those files. You're going to use your access to move client funds into the investments we've selected, and when the contract announcement is made, we'll all profit handsomely. And if I refuse? Then we turn you over to federal investigators as the mastermind behind a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. All the evidence points to you, Sarah. Your access to sensitive accounts, your history of financial impropriety, your suspicious behavior since joining the firm. You'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison." Sarah realized she was facing an impossible choice. She could participate in a massive fraud and become a genuine criminal, or she could refuse and be framed for crimes she didn't commit. Either way, her life was effectively over. "I need time to think about this. You have until tomorrow morning," Morrison said. "But don't even consider going to the authorities. We have people everywhere who would be very interested to learn about your activities tonight." As Sarah left Morrison's office, she felt completely defeated. She had risked everything to expose corruption, and had instead walked directly into a trap that would destroy her life. The brass key in her pocket felt like a mockery of her naive belief that she could redeem herself through honest action. But as Sarah rode the elevator down to the lobby, she realized that Morrison had made a critical mistake. In his arrogance and confidence, he had confirmed details about the defense contract scheme that she had only partially understood from the documents in the safe. More importantly, he had revealed the timeline for the fraud, giving her a narrow window to act. Sarah signed out with the security guard and walked into the cold night air, her mind already working on a plan that could still expose the corruption despite Morrison's trap. She had been outmaneuvered, but the game wasn't over yet. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work with a flash drive containing copies of all the photographs she had taken from Morrison's safe. She had spent the night researching federal financial crime investigators and had identified an agent named Catherine Torres, who specialized in prosecuting corruption cases involving investment firms. Before Morrison could corner her about participating in the defense contract scheme, Sarah slipped out of the building during her lunch break and met Agent Torres at a coffee shop several blocks away. "Agent Torres, my name is Sarah Martinez, and I have evidence of a massive fraud scheme involving insider trading and client asset manipulation." Torres, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, studied Sarah carefully. "What kind of evidence?" Sarah handed over the flash drive. "Photographs of documents detailing illegal trading activities, payoffs to officials, and plans for a major fraud involving a government defense contract." Torres reviewed the photographs on her laptop, her expression growing more serious with each image. "These are very serious allegations, Miss Martinez. Are you prepared to testify about how you obtained this information?" "I'm prepared to tell the truth, whatever the consequences. The truth being that you broke into a private safe and photographed confidential documents without authorization?" Sarah nodded. "The truth being that I uncovered evidence of crimes that would have continued harming innocent clients if I hadn't acted." 1. These reported. Torres considered this for several moments. "Miss Martinez, these documents appear to be genuine, and if verified, they represent evidence of federal crimes. However, the method by which you obtained them creates legal complications that could affect their admissibility in court." "What does that mean?" "It means we'll need additional evidence to corroborate what you've found. Evidence obtained through legal means that can support prosecution efforts." Sarah felt her hopes sinking again. Even when she did the right thing, Her methods were problematic enough to undermine the case against the real criminals. Agent Torres, in the documents I photographed, there are references to the defense contract scheme happening within the next 2 weeks. If we don't act quickly, more people will be hurt. Torres nodded grimly. I understand the urgency. Let me make some calls to see what kind of operation we can put together. In the meantime, you need to go back to work and act as if nothing has happened. Can you do that? I'll try. Don't try. Do it. Your safety and the success of this investigation depend on maintaining your cover until we can gather enough evidence to make arrests. Sarah returned to Whitmore and Associates feeling like she was walking back into a lion's den. Morrison was waiting at her desk, his expression expectant and threatening. Sarah, have you made your decision about our proposal? I need more details about what you're asking me to do. Morrison smiled with satisfaction, apparently interpreting her response as agreement to participate. Excellent. Meet me in conference room B at 6 o'clock tonight. We'll go over the specifics of the transfers you'll need to make. The rest of the day passed agonizingly slowly as Sarah tried to focus on routine work, while knowing that evening would bring either her salvation or her destruction. She had faith that Agent Torres was working to build a case against Morrison and Crawford, but she also knew that federal investigations moved slowly, and she might not have time to wait for official action. At 6 o'clock, Sarah entered conference room B to find Morrison, Crawford, and Eleanor Hartley waiting with laptops and financial documents spread across the table. Sarah, welcome to the big leagues, Crawford said with a predatory smile. Tonight, you're going to help us execute the most profitable trade of our careers. Eleanor gestured toward one of the laptops. We've identified 18 client accounts with sufficient assets to make the investments we need. Your job is to authorize the transfers that will move their money into the companies that will benefit from the defense contract announcement. Sarah sat down at the laptop, realizing that she was about to participate in the very crimes she had tried to expose. But as she looked at the screen, she noticed something that gave her hope. The computer system was recording every transaction and storing detailed logs that would provide perfect evidence of the fraud. Before I start, Sarah said, I want to understand exactly what we're doing and why it's necessary. Morrison leaned forward. We're investing client funds in companies that will receive major defense contracts next week. When the contracts are announced, the stock prices will skyrocket, and our clients will profit enormously. How do you know which companies will get the contracts? Crawford answered with obvious pride. Let's just say we have friends in high places who keep us informed about upcoming government decisions. And the clients whose money we're investing, they've agreed to these transactions? They've agreed to let us manage their assets in their best interests, Eleanor said. These investments definitely qualify as being in their best interests. Sarah began typing on the laptop, but instead of authorizing the transfers Morrison wanted, she was documenting everything they had told her about the insider trading scheme. Every admission, every detail about their sources of information, every plan for moving client money was being recorded in the system's activity logs. The first transfer isn't going through, Sarah announced after several minutes of typing. Morrison looked concerned. What's the problem? The system is requiring additional authorization for large transfers. It's asking for supervisor approval and risk assessment documentation. Crawford moved around the table to look at the laptop screen. That's strange. We've disabled those safeguards for tonight's transactions. Maybe the system reset itself, Sarah suggested. Let me try a different approach. Sarah continued typing, using her access to send detailed messages to the compliance department, documenting the pressure she was receiving to make unauthorized investments. She also forwarded copies of the transaction logs to her personal email account, creating an additional record of the attempted fraud. While Morrison and Crawford debated technical solutions to the supposed system problems, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Torres. Federal agents are in the building. Stay calm and keep them talking. Sarah felt a surge of relief mixed with terror. The investigation was moving forward, but she was still in a room with 3 people who would likely try to destroy her if they realized what was happening. I think I've figured out the problem, Sarah announced. The system is requiring physical verification from the secure storage facility upstairs. One of us needs to go up there and manually override the transfer restrictions. Morrison looked suspicious. You're sure that's what's required? It's what the system is telling me. Unless you know another way to authorize these transfers? Crawford stood up from the table. I'll go up and handle the override. David, you stay here and make sure Sarah doesn't get any ideas about backing out of our arrangement. As Crawford left the conference room, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of the elevators opening on their floor, followed by multiple sets of footsteps in the hallway. Agent Torres had apparently brought significant backup for the operation. Morrison's expression changed from confidence to concern as he heard the approaching footsteps. Sarah, what's going on? Before Sarah could answer, the conference room door burst open, and Agent Torres entered, followed by 6 federal agents in tactical gear. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Nobody move. Morrison reached for his phone, but one of the agents quickly restrained him before he could make any calls or send messages. David Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, insider trading, and violation of federal securities laws, Torres announced as she handcuffed him. Eleanor Hartley sat frozen in her chair, staring at the agents in apparent shock. There must be some mistake. We're just conducting routine business meetings. Ma'am, you're also under arrest, another agent informed her. You have the right to remain silent. As the agents read Morrison and Eleanor their rights, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The fraud scheme had been stopped, but she wasn't sure whether her own illegal actions in accessing Morrison's safe would also result in charges against her. Torres approached Sarah as the other suspects were led away. Miss Martinez, we're going to need you to come with us to provide a detailed statement about everything that happened tonight. Am I under arrest too? That depends on your level of cooperation and the accuracy of your statement. The information you provided has been invaluable, but there are still legal questions about your methods that need to be resolved. Sarah spent the next several hours at the federal building providing a complete account of her discoveries and the events leading up to the arrests. She held nothing back, describing her illegal access to Morrison's safe, her manipulation by Whitmore, and her decision to cooperate with the federal investigation. Torres listened carefully to every detail, occasionally asking follow-up questions about specific documents or conversations. When Sarah finished her statement, Torres leaned back in her chair and studied her thoughtfully. Miss Martinez, what you did was both illegal and incredibly brave. Breaking into that safe violated several federal laws, but the evidence you obtained has allowed us to prevent a fraud that would have cost investors millions of dollars. What happens to me now? That's going to depend on several factors. Your cooperation with this investigation has been exemplary, and your motives were clearly aimed at preventing further crimes rather than personal gain. However, we can't simply ignore the fact that you committed breaking and entering. Sarah felt her heart sink. After everything she had been through, she was still going to face criminal charges that would destroy any chance of rebuilding her career. However, Torres continued, federal prosecutors have significant discretion in cases like this. Given your cooperation and the importance of the crimes you helped expose, I'm going to recommend that you be offered immunity from prosecution in exchange for your testimony against Morrison, Crawford, and their accomplices. Sarah felt tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you, Agent Torres. I know I made mistakes, but I couldn't stand by and watch while people were being hurt. You did the right thing, Miss Martinez. It took courage to risk everything to expose corruption, especially given your own legal history. A lot of people in your position would have kept quiet to protect themselves. 3 months later, Sarah sat in a federal courtroom watching as David Morrison, James Crawford, and Eleanor Hartley were sentenced for their roles in the fraud conspiracy. The evidence she had gathered from Morrison's safe had proven crucial in securing convictions, and her testimony had helped prosecutors demonstrate the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Richard Whitmore had also been arrested, though he continued to maintain that he was a victim rather than a participant in the fraud scheme. Additional investigation had revealed that his claims about being coerced were largely fabricated, and that he had been actively involved in the conspiracy from its earliest stages. The Pemberton Foundation and other defrauded clients had recovered most of their stolen assets, and several had publicly thanked Sarah for her courage in exposing the crimes. Her reputation had been completely rehabilitated, and she had received job offers from several prestigious financial firms that valued her integrity and investigative abilities. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah had proven to herself and the world that her character was stronger than her past mistakes. The suspicion and mistrust that had followed her for years had been replaced by respect and admiration from colleagues and clients who recognized her willingness to do the right thing, regardless of personal cost. As she left the courthouse after the sentencing hearing, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. She had started her employment at Whitmore and Associates as a pariah desperate to rebuild her reputation. She was ending it as a hero who had exposed massive corruption and saved countless investors from financial ruin. The brass key that had opened Morrison's safe was now sitting in an evidence locker somewhere. But Sarah would always remember it as the key that had unlocked not just a criminal conspiracy, but also her own redemption. She had learned that integrity wasn't about avoiding mistakes or maintaining a perfect reputation. It was about having the courage to do what was right when it mattered most. Walking away from the courthouse into the bright afternoon sunlight, Sarah Martinez knew that she had finally proven her loyalty to the principles that mattered most: truth, justice, and the protection of those who couldn't protect themselves. The suspicious looks and whispered doubts were gone forever, replaced by the certain knowledge that when faced with the ultimate test, she had chosen honor over safety and truth over convenience. And that choice had made all the difference.